My name is Matt Geiger. I'm the author of a couple books. My first book is called Raised by Wolves and Other Stories. It's a collection of 44 essays. And my upcoming book, which comes out December 1st, and you can all pass it around and look at it, just to verify that it's real. It's a collection of other stories. And that first one won a couple little awards and things like that, so they let me write a second one. Which was really fun because all the stories in that book were written while going around doing readings at libraries and bookstores and things like that, and on the radio. So I kind of had test subjects for those stories while I was writing them, which is kind of cool. So I've written my whole adult life, newspapers and magazines and books. My degree is in philosophy, which is wonderful. Not super useful in the job market, but it comes in handy. As a parent or as a writer, it comes in handy. And the new book is actually about something very specific. There are certain themes I tried to use throughout it. And they're all supposed to be funny. It's not supposed to be something that is a slog to get through. But there are real things that the stories are about. There are some funny stories about death in there. If you look on the cover, the model for the cover, her name is Bonnie Logan, and she's 83, and she's this little old lady who I saw in a grocery store once, and she's been in a lot of bad car accidents and has very bad arthritis, and so she's about this tall now, and she's kind of question mark shaped, and she walks around with a walker and a glint in her eye. And someone kind of nudged me once and said, you should ask her about her life. And I asked her about her life, and she was a legendary pinup model in the 50s and 60s. And that's one of the themes of the book, is that if you scratch a little bit beneath the surface, you will be astonished by the things you find out about the people you encounter. And so, on the topic of astonishment, I should have checked the height of the microphone before I started. There we go. Can you hear me all right, everyone? This is a short story, but this kind of sums up what the book is about. The billboard had promised gasoline, sandwiches, and the opportunity to see a two-headed calf named Hetty. Standing in the rural gas station, I gazed up and scanned for signs it was a hoax. Maybe the deformity was evidence of a taxidermist's deft touch rather than the handiwork of a hilarious, but also cruel and uncaring God. Unlike driving a car or working at the office, this deserved my full attention. I regularly scold myself for being disengaged from the majestic world around me, for slipping away mentally, and not taking note of the beauty when a raindrop shatters against the peeling planks of an old porch, for not being stunned by the mythic atavistic form of a vast cloud of steam rising from the sagging jowls of a big dog on a sunny midwinter afternoon. It's strange because when I was a child, I was sure I was Sherlock Holmes. I would lie in the top bunk, a few inches from the ceiling, reading about the dramatic, theatrically morbid high of living in Victorian London. The tales would whisk me away to a dark, claustrophobic world full of mutton chops, opium dens, and all the tweed, steaming horse manure, and untreated venereal disease you could ever want. I always experienced them as homes. I too was aloof, eccentric, and misunderstood. I too was always the smartest person in the room. I always knew what was going on. I always saw the things around me, from killers lurking in the shadows to the dietary and social habits of those who merely played bit parts in the grand story swirling around me. Then it happened. I was sitting in a room full of peach-colored desks and chairs, surrounded by the strange smells and sounds of other children my age. We played a game of deduction, and a boy named Calvin solved nearly every problem before I could even raise my hand. Way to go, Calvin, the teacher shouted when it was over. I guess we have our very own Sherlock Holmes here. That's when it struck me. I wasn't Holmes. I was Watson. A sidekick, someone who saw little and understood less. Watson was always so astonished, a sure sign of stupidity, I thought. He admitted it out loud all the time. Astonishing, he would utter. I kept reading about Holmes, and after many years I came to see things differently. Watson wasn't blind. He He didn't see the things Holmes saw, of course, but he saw Holmes in his place at the center of a mysterious world. He saw it all with the metavision of any good author. After all, they were Watson's stories. Maybe, I thought with a little grin, I am just like Watson, who wasn't dumb after all. Maybe I can look around and see two-headed calves, love and beauty, where other people do not. Perhaps like him, I can be constantly amazed. I did crack the case of the two-headed calf, at least. It belongs to a nice Midwestern couple who own the gas station. It was born alive on a nearby farm, but its back broke during the delivery. It experienced the world for a moment, then died, the glint vanishing from its 4 black eyes. Then they stuffed and mounted her heads. As we chatted, Hetty's current owner looked up at her and smiled. "We put antlers on her at Christmas," she said. "They festoon the whole place with garlands and holiday cheer, and they never forget to make sure Hetty is part of the celebration." Something about the absurdity of it was beautiful. I smiled back, looked up at the calf again, and said the only word that came to mind: astonishing. That was a piece I wrote for Wisconsin Public Radio. They aired on Wisconsin Life. And when I went into that gas station, I was coming home from a book reading I did actually in Mineral Point. And there is a mutant two-headed calf right over a display case with sausages and cheese in it, in a gas station where they sell sandwiches and lottery tickets and whatever. And the guy working there, I went up to him and was like, "So what is the deal with that?" And first of all, it took a minute. He was like, "The deal with what?" And I was like, And he was like, "The cheese?" And I was like, "No, the mutant animal that gets stuffed right over the top of it." And he was like, "Oh, that? I don't know." And I was like, "Okay." And so do a lot of people like come here and ask about it? And he was like, "Most people don't notice it." And that's when I actually decided what I wanted to write these stories about, because I'm amazed. I understand as well as anyone else. I have a little 4-year-old girl, so I get that the world is a terrible place full of turmoil and suffering and inequality and all these awful things. I don't deny that, but I'm amazed at the fact that everyone can see those so clearly, and no one can see the bizarre, beautiful stuff that's going on all around us. And that's what humor is. That's all humor is just seeing things that are right there in front of you that other people aren't seeing, or seeing things in a new or different way. And I use something called astronomy, which is a Russian literary device. Throughout the book, Chekhov did it with everything. And the idea is that you show something, you make something ordinary weird, or make someone see something ordinary as weird. And what that does is it rattles the reader's vision, and then they can see everything as if for the first time. They can see everything better, and then you can write a story, and they can see the world around them in a way that they don't when they're sleepwalking through stuff. I'm just as guilty of it as everyone else, but I'm always constantly amazed. You drive home for an hour from work or something, and you won't remember a second of the drive, or you'll sit down in a chair and you won't know what color the chair is. You just kind of identify a cherished thing and plop down on it. And so one of the main characters in my writing is my daughter, because she's a wonderful way to write about someone who is seeing everything for the first time, because if we all do that, everything looks weirder and better and funnier and more beautiful. So. My phone recognized my voice while I was doing that reading and turned on and thought I was going to ask her to do something. All right. I have them. It's weird. So I'm going to read you a story. Almost all the stories I'll read tonight will be out of the new book, but I just wanted to get this ready. I'll read you this one first, and then I will read one out of the other book. I remembered how much I like this story, and I'll try not to sniffle into the microphone. This is the first story in the book, and also part of the last story in the book. Loathing Matt Geiger is so damn easy. That's a real headline on a popular blog. Is Matt Geiger black? It's a topic of heated, though not particularly nuanced, debate. These are the things I have to read when I Google myself. I'm not the most famous Matt Geiger. I haven't been since at least 1992 when I was 12 years old, and a guy who shared my name was drafted into the NBA. The following day, someone left a little envelope in my locker. Oh, a love note, I thought excitedly. Pulling the paper pouch down from the shelf, I saw a portion of a newspaper sports section fall out and corkscrew erratically to the ground. Oh no, it's just some sports news, I thought, with a small slump of my shoulders as I picked it up and read it. It was about the NBA draft. Someone had circled Matt Geiger, the name of a player selected by the Miami Heat. I thought it wouldn't significantly impact my life. I was wrong. Many years later, when I was 37 and my first book came out, my publisher had me sign up to receive alerts whenever my name is mentioned in the press. I imagine the enthusiastic little ding my phone makes when I receive a message, followed by a series of articles by critics who said I was, quote, the next Michael Perry, or, quote, like the hilarious and talented love child of David Sedaris and Bill Bryson. I'm still waiting for those notifications, although Mr. Perry really did refer to my debut, and this was one of the proudest moments of my life, as a book. What I usually get is a peppering of stories about advanced basketball analytics and nostalgic retrospectives about the 2001 NBA Finals. Usually with a headline like, Matt Geiger reflects on losing on the NBA's biggest stage. Matt, who stands a full foot closer to the heavens than I do, was a solid pro with a long career. I've had my breath taken away several times when I inadvertently stumbled upon headlines about his life and mistook him for me. There was the time, shortly after the dawn of the new millennium, when I, an increasingly flabby and sedentary college student, was forced to sit out several games for steroid use. Then I built a 28,000 square foot mansion in the Tampa Bay area. It had 6 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms because, while I only want half a dozen people resting in my house at any given moment, I need to make sure at least 2 more than that can urinate, all at the exact same moment. While the bedrooms and bathrooms seemed excessive even to me, the shark tank, which was also part of the house, was a rock-solid idea. It wasn't practical in the manner of a walk-in food pantry or a place to hang coats by the doorway, but it was pretty much required that I keep dangerous and exotic animals in a domestic setting once my career as a professional athlete came to an end. I suspect such language might even be written into most athletes' contracts. Or perhaps on your last day, as a heavyweight boxer or NFL wide receiver, you simply receive a nice watch and a baby onward tiger. My advisors in college regularly warned me that writing and philosophy are not traditionally sources of lavish income. Imagine their surprise when they read in a magazine about my artificial lake, stocked with 2,500 bass, or my personal herd of bison, Watusi cattle, donkeys, and a single miniature horse. When I read about the horse, I couldn't help but think, at this point, why not just go crazy and get 2? It's strange to look yourself up online and learn you have 40 televisions in your home, 18 of which are directly linked to video game consoles. It's weird to worry that maybe, on second thought, you don't have enough bathrooms for all the people who come over to play Xbox. It's bizarre to get genuinely mad at county officials when you read that they won't let you install your own private helicopter pad in the backyard due to some silly zoning regulations. None of these emotions compares to the way I felt when I learned Matt Geiger owed $300,000 in back taxes, or the genuine chagrin with which I greeted the following headline in the Tampa Bay Times in 2011. Matt Geiger's mansion finally sells at a big discount. Fuck, I thought, even my fantasy version of myself is bad with money. Then something worse occurred to me. What will happen to my donkeys? Reading that the bigger, richer, more successful version of myself had fallen into a pit of economic despair was like being Clark Kent, and learning Superman has really bad degenerative arthritis. This is what it's like to discover the night you're pretending to be in a daydream has crippling seasonal allergies and can't go dragon hunting because there's simply too much mucus. I really am incredibly absent-minded. I forget appointments, and my daily car key hunt has become something of a glum ritual in my house. I'm an agnostic, so I don't pray to God often, but when I do, I usually ask the divine creator and prime mover to help me find my socks or my wallet. I'm even able to lose remote controls without ever rising from the couch, which is, perhaps, a special kind of talent. I frequently forget major life events, and I always try to forget that I once moved from Florida to New Jersey, which is like clearing up your malaria with a nice case of bird flu. The point is, I'm accustomed to remembering things about myself, things I had previously forgotten, so I often wonder just for a moment if maybe I really did fall behind on my taxes or get screwed by county officials who are merely jealous of my helicopter and its need for an adequate place to land. A popular national magazine based out of New York once contacted me and asked that I track down a local Midwestern man named Johnny Depp. They were doing a piece about ordinary people who share names with celebrities. When I found the guy's address and went to his apartment building, I encountered a level of squalor that gave me pause. Perhaps highlighting the differences between these two men, their jobs, their lovers, their incomes, their bone structure, and whether or not their eyes twinkled would be unintentionally cruel. We might as well put an elderly alley cat with mange right next to a robust lion, photograph them, then point out to readers all over the country that one cat is actually much better than the other. Standing there, I realized what the magazine had really wanted me to do. Ask the one whose life is demonstrably worse in every aspect what it's like to live in a cruel, ironic universe. Through the apartment's hollow door, I heard someone haranguing Mr. Depp, so I walked away without ringing the bell. A couple of years later, I read that Johnny Depp, the movie star, had run into serious financial and marital problems, and I considered returning now that their lifestyles were likely much more similar. Then I forgot all about it, just like I sometimes forget I didn't score 5,000 points during my NBA career. Sometimes I wonder if maybe the Matt Geiger who played basketball ever Googles himself and finds something about me instead. Maybe he was confused when he read that he penned a collection of essays. Or perhaps he nodded his enormous shaven head and empathized when he read criticism of me. I don't know. I tried to reach the other Matt Geiger. I got as far as his twin brother Mark, with whom I spoke on the phone in 2017. He was friendly, and he told me he'd relayed the message to his brother. I never heard back. The internet masses are obsessed with race, gender, and political affiliation, so it was only a matter of time before I received an alert directing me to a blog thread in which people engaged in fierce debate about whether Matt Geiger is black or white. Some wrote that he is white, possibly because he is. Others argued with conviction that he is African American, defending their position with various statistics and metrics that indicated he was simply too good to be white. Larry Bird came up, as did Spike Lee, and that's about the time I realized they weren't talking about me. I was late for work, and I really needed to put my phone in my pocket and start looking for my keys. That's enough internet for today, I muttered as I walked out the door. The headline I really don't want to read hasn't been written yet. Matt Geiger is dead. I know it would fill me with despair to get an enthusiastic little ding on my phone and be greeted with those words. Reading of my own demise would inevitably lead to a deep depression, but it's unlikely for ontological reasons. Reading about the death of someone else, in this case someone who appears to be genuinely nice, and with whom I'm somehow linked, might also ruin my day. The alternative is not much better. It's that one morning, a retired basketball player will read that some other guy has died, someone with whom he shares a name and a deep affection for miniature horses. Either way, Matt Geiger will be dead. Long live Matt Geiger. It's like the Gatorade at a basketball game, except it's coffee, which is writer's Gatorade, I guess we would say. So that's one of the sillier pieces in there, but I had so much fun with the idea of identity. We all crave identity so much, and there's a piece in here, I did a DNA test for the book and found out that I have a kind of staggeringly high amount of Neanderthal DNA. But you know, that stuff's all the same. We're all searching for identity, all of us, and we're trying to define ourselves in our own eyes and the eyes of others. And apparently I'm a Neanderthal with the same name as a basketball player. But I just realized I can move the base of this. That's much, much better, actually. There's a story in the book called Everyday Easter Eggs, and that was the working title of the book for 2 years, basically. And then my publisher didn't like it, and no one else liked it either, but I liked it. And it's the name of this story, which was published by the Sunlight Press, which is a literary journal devoted to prose, nonfiction, and poetry that focuses on beauty. And they didn't like the title either. They published it as Anytime We Want, I believe is what they called it. But in the book, it's called Everyday Easter Eggs. So I won that battle at least. She had the drill again. Is this too loud for yoga, Mom? Hadley, our 2-year-old daughter, belted over its roar. Her fat, thick feet skidded to a stop when they left the slick faux hardwood and snagged in the matted yellow shag carpeting. It's one of those little lines of demarcation that give our domestic world its contours, a place where synthetic brown planks are engulfed in the doorway by fiery nylon tufts. For a toddler, it's a lesson in surface friction. For adults, it serves as a reminder of the vast aesthetic excesses of the 1970s. Is this too loud for yoga? She yelled again. Unpredictable curls of hair bounced like springs in her face as she grasped the power tool. It was a toy, but as loud as the real thing. It sounded like a garbage disposal struggling to choke down a rack of beef ribs. My wife was in front of the television, following the instructions given forcefully by the contortionist on the screen. Warrior pose, downward-facing dog, inside-out bonobo. Taking her finger off the trigger just long enough to squeeze in another sentence of her own, Hadley suddenly adopted the rolling, countrified voice of a portly southern sheriff. My mom don't like it. Then she turned, fired up the power tool again, and sprinted away in the more happy, much faster cousin of a galumph. I could tell by the way the sound oscillated between loud and quiet that she was running from room to room. It was the second time in a week that she, a little girl who has never been south of Illinois, suddenly began speaking in a syrupy southern drawl. The first time she was seated naked in the bathtub, our little gray cat, lost in pleasant speculation about where to throw up next, wandered into the bathroom. He suddenly saw the child and the water was filled with visible horror and bolted. Aw, Hadley lamented, my cat don't take a bath. She sounded like the kind of person who gives sentimental Christian names to shotguns and pickup trucks. Names like Darlene and Luann. Apologies if there are any Darlenes or Luanns here. Perhaps our house had once been owned by an old Southern general whose ghost was now floating around haunting the place, occasionally possessing my toddler. Demonic possession, I realized, would also explain several of her other more erratic behaviors. Or maybe it was a genetic thing, like having a cleft palate or webbed toes. I imagined a doctor returning to the examination room and sitting down with a somber look on her face. We got the test results back, she would say with grim sincerity. They're positive. I'm sorry, but your daughter is Southern. They say you're not supposed to laugh at your own stuff. I really like that. Siri just turned on. No, there we go. Every sentence my daughter utters is an adventure. When she sees a flock of ducks, she'll point at them and smile. What are the ducks doing? They're swimming on the pond, honey. Then she'll point to a cluster of men near the shore. What are the mans doing? The men are fishing. Okay, and what are the fish doing? The fish, I say with a sigh, are swimming, or maybe fishes, I don't know. Let's get away from the water. The lesson is always the same, that English is confusing and inconsistent, just like everything else in life. Get used to it and enjoy it, I tell her. No one really knows as much as they pretend to know. She's never disappointed with an answer, and she appears perfectly content in the understanding that ignorance and wildly speculative guesses are just natural, healthy steps on the journey toward a better comprehension of the world. Like the fact that you might have to take a few left-hand turns on your cross-country trip, even though your final destination is on the right. In the spring, we made Easter eggs with her, primarily as a way to kill an hour before the sunset, a time when I can turn on the television without feeling like a bad parent. It was Easter after all, and that is traditionally when you boil and decorate bird embryos to celebrate the resurrection of an ancient bird of God and the impending visitation of a massive, generous rodent. Hadley loved it, squealing and laughing as she mixed the dyes together to create a shade of brown she is particularly fond of. A few days later, as I pitched some kitchen scraps into the backyard for our chickens, she turned off her drill and looked up at me. Her hair was straight that day, according to its whims, but her eyes were as big, dark, and sincere as ever. Dad, I want to make Easter eggs. Oh, we can't, I said, with the well-worn confidence of an imbecile. We can only decorate eggs on... It was at this point I realized I had no idea on what day Easter actually falls. Well, it moves around, I think. After a brief consultation with my phone, I discovered Easter always takes place on the first Sunday following the Paschal full moon. What's Paschal full moon, Daddy? She asked. Rather than descending further down this particular rabbit hole, I decided to adapt my worldview. You know what? We can make Easter eggs. Also, sweetheart, I really have no idea when the Paschal full moon is. I said as my heart began thumping fervently in my chest, as if I were a general marching up and down before a line of warriors on some vast field of battle, can decorate eggs anytime we want. I dropped the Tupperware bowl I was holding. She discarded her drill. Then we went inside and decorated all our eggs. It was one of the best mornings of my life, one of those rare days when you aren't just secretly biding your time until it's socially acceptable to drink beer, play video games, or go to sleep and just try all over again the next morning. One of those events during which, if someone asks you what you'd rather be doing, you reply honestly, nothing. It's what parenting is all about, the chance to teach someone how to use verbs and toilets, while they teach you that most of the rules governing our lives are arbitrary and pointless. Many are simply relics from the days when people had very different problems and priorities. Which side of the plate a knife goes on, when and where you can wear hats, and how tall your grass can be. These are guidelines with no practical implications anymore. People take them seriously simply because they're told to, and as they grew up, they stopped asking questions. I often discover such rules were created to combat problems long ago swept away by the modern world. This one is so you won't catch polio, and that one is so you won't stub your toe on all the Tasmanian tigers lying around. Like the Great Wall of China, which has outlived the marauding Mongol hordes it was built to keep out, the solutions outlasted their corresponding problems. So I'm rapidly letting go of all the inane, arbitrary rules that govern most adults' lives. Maybe it's because my daughter has shown me that being distant and glum and taking work and politics too seriously are guidelines you don't really need to follow. Or maybe it's just the sound of a little orange plastic power drill gradually driving me towards some kind of blissful insanity. All I know is that every sentence is an adventure, and every day comes with a chance of Easter eggs.
You can only follow through and do that though if you buy a few die kits in advance.
Well, yes. We try to do everything naturally in order for good or ill. And we of course read that you could just use beet juice to dye your eggs. And if you want to dye a whole bunch of eggs a very off-putting shade of brown, just use beet juice. We went through so much to do it, and we hard-boiled all these eggs in it, and when it was all done, I was like, honey, they're gonna be beautiful, it's gonna be amazing, and they dried, and I was like, oh, they're the color of brown eggs. So we went to the store and we got the ones with artificial coloring and made them look spectacular the next time. It's great. So now we stock up on that stuff when we have bags and bags of it, which explains why there are a lot of dyed things in my house. Do you have any questions? I have plenty to read, but I do want to ask if you have any questions about me or the book or the weather or anything else. Just not politics, because I not possibly care less. Oh, you're so affable. This is usually the point where someone goes, what gives you the right to be up there telling me how to live my life?
Yeah, I
Does that really happen?
Oh, okay, that spurred you on him.
After you, studied all these major philosophies and stuff, then did you find that just kind of with no effort of your own, did it wind up kind of being a rich mixture that kind of generated kind of some things that were uniquely your own and original with you that you drew from and kind of,
What a delightful question, thank you. I didn't plant her there, by the way, that was really nice. No, I mean, I like philosophy, and I'm always amazed when people go, philosophy, what's the point of that? Well, it's literally like all the most important things in the world being thought about and talked about. Like, obviously there's a point to it. And I love it, and I still love it to this day. I'm 39, I'll be 40 next year, and I still read philosophy and theology all the time. And one night I'll go to bed reading the Tao Te Ching, and the next night, something else, the next night something else, and the next night Proust or whatever. And you don't have to be that smart. I'm not particularly smart. Sometimes people ask me, well, you write these books, so you think you know more than other people, you have to write this stuff. And I don't. The only thing I ask of authors is that they know things that I don't know, different things, not more. And I barely know anything about anything. I truly cannot get through the day without a lot of assistance from my wife and even my daughter at this point. But studying philosophy for all those years has taught me a lot. And one is that the world is resplendent in its beauty. There's so much beauty in the world. And that's why all my stories have some element in them of like, hey, by the way, look around. And it can be things that are classically beautiful. I saw a bald eagle. I was driving down the highway on the way here today, and I saw this bald eagle perched over the top of the highway. And I grew up in New England in the 80s, and you didn't see bald eagles. They were basically, everyone was like, yeah, they'll be extinct soon. Like, there are no bald eagles anymore. And this thing was 50 feet up in the air, and it was still this big. It was just amazing. There's that stuff, but then there's the other stuff too. Just the ridiculous stuff that's beautiful. I have a whole story in that book about, I won't burden you with the story, but when we were at the doctor, right before my daughter was born, we went through all this stuff, and it's a lot of checklists, and it seems like you're kind of being tested to make sure that like they can send the baby home with you, sort of. And our doctor was like, yeah, and the placenta, like, what do you want to do with the placenta? And my wife and I were like, what, And it's like, the placenta, what are you going to do with it? And we're like, I don't know, like, isn't that what we're paying you for? And you'd like to do something with it? And we're like, he was like, well, no, some people take it home and plant a bush on top of it, or a tree on top of it, or whatever. And we were like, okay, we'll do that. And we brought it home, and we were so euphoric, right? We had this godlike power, right? We created a living person, and everything is perfect. And I put it on the yard and buried it, and planted the blueberry bush on top of it, and it just died. The blueberry bush just withered immediately. And the story's all about that. And there's a lesson in there. But I think that withered, dead stick of a blueberry bush was more beautiful than any thriving blueberry bush could have been because of the lesson. You have to buy the book to learn the lesson. But it essentially has to do with the fleeting nature of life, and it's a really good reminder that it all ends. And those lessons come in all the different major world religions, all the different philosophies. We're all going to die. And given that, why not look for beauty along the way? Because we have a finite amount of time and resources and energy. And I don't want people to get me wrong. I don't think that we should ignore the ills of the world. But I worry a little bit. My daughter's 4, and the world won't be fixed by the time she's an adult. It won't. I hope a bunch of the problems that are current will be fixed, but all of them won't be. And anyone who thinks, oh yeah, just 10 more years and humans will figure it all out, is probably trying to sell you something. So I do kind of take umbrage at the idea that she can't lead a happy, meaningful life unless everything gets fixed by the time she's an adult. So that's what a lot of the philosophy that you read, it reminds you to think about those things. And so because you asked that, I'll read you an old story that people seem to like. I got an email from someone in the middle of the night once who was up all night reading my book, and they loved this story. It was so touching, because usually you just get messages from people who are mad. This is called Monkhood. It's about studying philosophy. I wanted to be a monk, brimming with mirth, a crooked tonsure atop my head. My earthy cloak secured by a length of rustic rope and strained by a belly full of warm pretzels and frothy ale. I pictured myself standing in the entrance to an ancient monastery. Behind me, the light from a fire would perform a gleeful jig on dank stone walls. At my side, a brawny Ursine brown and white dog would stand. Together, we would gaze out at a frigid, windswept mountain range, the vastness of which reminded us of the universe's endless mysteries. It was largely an aesthetic desire. I liked the idea of wearing a single article of clothing, a robe, every day. Yet recent personal experiences had taught me that wearing a robe, in my case a bathrobe, all day in secular life invites people to call you lazy and slovenly. My winters would be spent studying texts, copying gilded illustrations from decaying calfskin pages originally adorned by earlier monks who surely lived in a cave on some remote island. My summers would be spent growing medicinal herbs or perhaps wandering through mountain passes, pausing frequently to lean on my staff, smiling and nodding as I slowly, surely figured out the meaning of life. I had a professor who was a former Franciscan monk. I visited his office frequently to engage in reconnaissance. Sitting at his desk and playing with a Jesus Christ action figure, he turned to when in need of a chuckle, he provided glimpses into life in a monastery. I thought I would make an excellent monk. I was already studying philosophical and theological texts, so that part would be a piece of cake. If I could fake it in college, I could fake it in a monastery. I began reading about the various religious orders. My first criterion, of course, was the robes. They had to be of the friar tuck variety, brown and baggy, leaving room for the spiritual and physical growth that would inevitably accompany a life spent reading and eating cabbage, cheese, a shade of brown capable of masking any stain. Most of the modern vestments didn't provide the vibe I was going for. I like the Buddhist beliefs, but I know men of my girth should not drape themselves in bright orange. Only earth tones would do for this future holy man. The Dominicans' black and white wasn't rugged enough. I thought the Knights Templar looked pretty good in their white and red. But the fact that they ceased to exist in the Middle Ages made joining them difficult. I wanted, I realized, but did not say aloud, to look like a Jedi. So what type of staff did you get? I asked my professor while exiting class one day. Was it tall and gnarled? Did you guys have beards or were you clean shaven? Did you wear sandals or does footwear not matter since your shoes are hidden underneath your robes? But my journey to monkhood was also fraught with worries. As I learned more about the inner workings of various monasteries, I noticed a lot of things you weren't allowed to do. A vow of poverty would be fine, being, as it was, essentially just a verbal affirmation of my current situation. But most of the other vows seemed a bit harsh for my taste. I've never really liked the idea of being defined by a long list of things I've promised not to do. Rasputin, the Siberian mad monk who left a trail of shenanigans in his wake, offered some encouragement. Having once read a biographer refer to his morning prayers as, quote, well-earned, I saw him as an inspiration. But deeper digging revealed he wasn't actually a real ordained monk. Plus, he was shot, stabbed, poisoned, drowned, and frozen, all of which are occupational hazards I find hard to accept. My professor tried to dissuade me. He even suggested I didn't know what the word monk really meant. When I asked him if he learned any cool spells behind the walls of his monastery, he cocked his head to the side and looked at me quizzically. You know we're not wizards, right, Matt? Yeah, I know, Dr. Thompson, I replied. I'm not an idiot. Do you get your wand right away when you join, or do you have to pass a test and then get it? And soon enough, the dream dissipated. Life went on, and I forgot all about my plan. My closet remained full of shirts and pants, and I never promised not to do anything. But from time to time, I still find myself thinking about religion and religious men and women. After all, you can't study religion without studying people. The question I like most is not, does your God exist? After all, that's a question without an answer, at least not in this world. A far more interesting question, I think, is what is your God like? After all, you can tell a lot about people by meeting their deity. Perhaps because I still think about these things, I'm becoming a bit monkish these days. I have a wife and a daughter, which I understand is frowned upon within most monasteries. But I also have a massive brown and white dog. If I ever want a big pretzel and some local ale, I just walk over to the Grumpy Troll, a little brewery in the town.
Sorry.
I'm getting a nice little bald spot on top of my head, as if the universe wants me to have a stylish tonsure. I have a fireplace, and I still like to flip through old philosophical and theological texts. Sometimes I even stand in the doorway, feeling the flames at my back and gazing out into the wintry vastness of the American Midwest. If you ever see my silhouette, bathrobe draped around me, big dog at my side, rest assured I'm quietly giving thanks for all the mysteries the universe has given us to ponder. I mean, that sounds. I don't. My 4-year-old daughter does. It's always really hard to decide which ones to read. I have time for 2 more short ones, right? How long do I need to go? I don't want to hold people captive.
Oh, no. The library closes at 8, but we usually stay after on offer night, so feel no obligation to.
Well, I'll do something short here. Do you want 2 short, funny ones, or do you want 1 longer, more serious one? Honestly, you can pick.
Anyone?
Funny ones?
Funny.
Okay. Shit. Oh, it's so subjective. Since you said that, I'm going to read one about how subjective humor is, because the subjective nature of human existence is a theme throughout this book too, so. Just take me a minute to get there. And I'm also going to read you, oh my goodness gracious. The book's really long when you're scrolling through it like this. The epigraph in the book is by Jorge Luis Borges, who's brilliant writer, and he almost won the Nobel Prize for Literature, but he lost to Gabriel Garcia Marquez the year that he wrote, the year that he won for for 100 Years of Solitude. But he said this amazing thing, and the book was kind of written to this idea. I'm almost at this. I told you preparation isn't for cowards, so you have to bear with me while I find these things. So the epigraph of the book, and I prefer a different translation of it. It's in Spanish, but we're going to get the rights to that translation. So the metaphysicians do not seek for truth or even an approximation of it, but rather for the astounding. I love that so much. Okay, this story is called Meh, Not So Funny. I got a lot of reviews for my first book, and some of them were very nice. And some book critics that I've never met that I really respect and whose book reviews I've read for a long time said nice things about it. Pioneer Press in the Twin Cities it's just a wonderful, their books editor has been there for 50 years and she's amazing and she was really sweet. The very first newspaper review of my first book that I got was from the Florida Keys, and he was awful. He was really, really brutal. And I was like, well, I'll just have to go to the Keys and beat him up, and then we'll move on. And I was looking at plane tickets, and I realized that you can't do that because you'd have to beat up so many people. But then I had that thing where it was like the first scratch on a car or something. I was like, oh, okay, now I got a bad review. But it got me thinking about the subjective nature of humor, which everyone knows, but also beauty, which if you study philosophy, you study aesthetics, and you know that there are some guidelines to beauty, but they're not real, so. A good review can be good, but only a bad review can achieve greatness. More than any other species, our very nature and even the reality of our existence is based upon how each individual experiences the world. Cows don't wander around wondering if they exist, whether God exists, whether beauty exists, or whether the existence of any of them is contingent upon the ability to conceive of them. But we do. I do. That's why people often put the word arguably before claims about greatness as a qualifier. It's just a small admission that yes, each person's value judgments are unique. That's why the Beatles are arguably the greatest band ever and War and Peace is arguably the best book, because everything is arguable. If you don't believe me, just look at the comment section below the least controversial thing you can find on YouTube, a sick kid petting a puppy or something, and notice how quickly it becomes a rancorous debate about Trump or whether or not 9/11 was an inside job. At the beginning of Swann's Way, Marcel Proust talks about the experience of waking up in his bedroom as a child. For a moment he lies there as a mere husk, ignorant of the world and even of himself. Then his past experiences, the places he has been and might currently be, come flooding back into his mind. When it is over, he is once again himself. We've probably all experienced this, the fleeting moment of bliss the morning after a loved one dies, before you remember the reality into which you are opening your eyes. One might argue that the world is there, but 100% of what we know of the world around us, of our children and our gods and our friends, is gathered and understood through our subjective experiences. Proust even wonders if maybe the only thing that holds the doorknob and the lamp to their forms and functions as doorknobs and lamps is the very fact that we conceive them as such. And I wonder if religion isn't just the idea that maybe our forms and functions are the way they are because something else conceives us to be that way. Whenever this gets me down, whenever I fret because millions of people think the world is flat or whatever, I can always make myself feel better by reading bad reviews of things I know to be the pinnacle of human achievement. You don't have to go far. Amazon and Goodreads are home to thousands of one-star reviews of the very best books ever written, arguably. James Joyce's Ulysses has about 1,000 one-star reviews on Goodreads. One reviewer explained his low rating this way: "It fell in my toilet, and I'm accepting it as an act of God," he said. The one-star reviews of Isabel Allende's elegant The House of the Spirits are particularly fun. One states simply, "I think this book was all right, but there is a lot of confusing things." Indeed. Another says he hated the book, then admits he didn't actually read it. One reviewer, who gave it 1 star and also admitted she had not actually read the whole book, said she didn't like it because someone was mean to a chicken in it. Boring 1-star reviews tend to run screaming into the realm of politics. "This is communist propaganda," is a popular trope. Good ones push the boundaries of what a review is and what it can tell us about ourselves. Critics of humorous prose have it easy. All they really have to say is not funny, and their work is pretty much done. After all, humor is even more subjective than most things. But David Sedaris might be the most clever author on the planet, and his tales of love and woe reach deep into our collective souls. Thousands of people disagree with me, apparently. One reviewer of his Me Talk Pretty one day even penned her 1-star review directly to the author, as if in the hopes that maybe she could convince him to stop writing. "You think you're funny? Meh, not that funny. Special? You're not that special either. You're a writer, just another writer. What's the big deal?" Another critic said she was appalled by his book. "In my opinion, his joke regarding his pet's need for dialysis was especially scathing since I lost my beloved 18-year-old Shih Tzu to chronic kidney failure last year." Her profile photo is one of her with her little dog, presumably before its demise. She shelved the book in a couple categories, including, quote, "books set in New York," and, quote, "worst books I've ever read." I really love all dogs, and I really love some humans, even writers like Mr. Sedaris. I think it's possible to love them both. I'd like to point out that this person's Shih Tzu was 126 in dog years when it died, which seems like something short of a tragedy. Cruelty to animals does seem to produce bad reviews. Perhaps I should delete the part in my next manuscript where I kick an endangered panda to death, or the entire chapter where I discuss the best ways to light a chipmunk on fire. Yet another reader is more diplomatic in her review of Sedaris. She writes simply, "I didn't think it was funny. Is something wrong with me?" Yes. My favorite bad review is for the collected works of William Shakespeare. Surely you think this book receives only 5-star reviews and glowing praise, right? I mean, it's Shakespeare. This one comes from Amazon. These reviews are notorious among authors because people often give poor ratings based on the amount of time it took to arrive in the mail, or whether or not the pages of a used copy were dog-eared. Two things that even the best author cannot really control. This review is so wonderful I took a screenshot of it so I can visit it whenever I feel down. The collected works of William Shakespeare received a single damning star. The reason? The reviewer, who I'll admit is more to the point than the bard, explains it in a single sentence. "I didn't order this." I like that so much. you can waste an entire evening just reading these glorious things, because you can just click on Goodreads in particular, or Amazon, you can just click the 1-star ones and read them, and they're fantastic. And if you're ever just worried about the world, or nuclear war, or whatever, like, just read those and you'll feel 1,000 times better. Well, that was kind of a lot. Do you have any questions, criticism? How many stars? When my editor read this story, my editor is an asshole, and he wrote at the end of that story, he wrote I give this 2 stars. I edited a lot of it after that, so hopefully it's better now. But what do you read, all of you?
When you were talking about, really tuning in and seeing things, I was wondering if you have ever read any Thornton Wilder?
A little bit, a long time ago though, yeah.
Because, I don't know, somehow when I came through school like 150 years ago, well, all right for me, I know it's 200, but okay, but, we always had to read. It seemed like the assignment came around almost every year to read our town, and of course he was a Wisconsin native. And I remember one time after reading that was his whole point, look around you. And I remember, being in my home kitchen, which was painted kind of a mint green, and just looking, and having been at the suggestion of this play. And it kind of tuned in, I think, with some of what you were trying to say.
I've seen some of the most beautiful things, and this is a story in the book too, but that idea was strong in me, the Russian thing, where you see things and you see them in a new way. I actually think it happens, and this won't be gross or anything, but I think it happens a lot in bathrooms, because what you need is your senses to get jarred, right? So a lot of the time people are in a bar or restaurant, and it's dimly lit and it's loud. You go into the restroom, and it's like bright white, and all the noise, the door shuts behind you and all the noise goes away. And all of a sudden you're in this like non-porous room. And if you look around, like frequently I'll see like a tile in the ceiling or something, and you'll catch yourself just going like, what on earth? Or you'll see a face in a coat rack, or you'll see whatever, and you see stuff, and it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. I mean, it's one of the, it's actually overwhelming how wonderful the world is. I mean, it's overwhelming how terrible it is too, obviously, but we all already know that. So I don't need to write a book about that, but I think it's great. I think there's cool stuff everywhere. Who was I going to say? Who else does it really well? I was just thinking of an author. Oh my gosh, I bring this book everywhere with me. So this is probably the funniest book ever written. And my stuff's kind of funny, but it's also, it's also a little bit serious and things like that. Catherine Newman, who I've never met and I don't know, and who lives many thousands of miles away, and who's published by a much larger publishing company than me, wrote a book called Catastrophic Happiness, and it is the funniest book ever. And the first few pages alone are, it's amazing. She refers to her body, she's a mother of 2, and she refers to her body as like a baggy, poorly curated exhibit about reproduction. And she's just fantastic. And she's amazing, and if any of you do end up reading my new book, you'll see there's a big blurb on the back by her, because she really liked it, which, even if no one buys my book, kind of made the whole exercise worthwhile for me. That's why I greatly admire her. And she was a big fan, which was great, so.
Then can we rightly conclude that one of your motivations and goals in writing, one of the things you'd like to accomplish?
Is to be adored.
No, not quite, but to elicit this wonder, this awareness in your readers, is that one of the things?
I don't know what just happened to me, I just stuck your microphone in my face. It's 100% the goal. I'm not a particularly good writer, I'm not a great writer, but I hope, and I'm pretty small time, I'm not a bestseller or anything, but once in a while some stranger will look me up on my website, geigerbooks.com, and then send a little note about something that they now see differently or better or experience in a new way because of a stupid little story. And one of the nicest things people say to me sometimes, So these stories they're ostensibly about something, right? And then they're always about something else, which is not the most clever thing in the world. Most writers do that. But a lot of the time people will read a story and then they'll tell me like 6 months later they were thinking about it and they realized that it was actually wasn't just about dandelions, it was about whatever. So yeah, I hope when people read the new book in particular, I hope when people read it, they see everything a little better. Because I think if you see things well, you'll be a little happier. And not in some crazy quixotic way, but just because you're seeing the stuff around you. That's
Is a 4-year-old hurting the writing discipline, both?
helping. So so I'm not a good enough, I love magical realism, I think that's a wonderful type of writing, and I am not a good enough writer to write magical realism, unless I'm writing through the eyes of a kid. And because kids are just magical realists, everything is magical to them, because they don't totally understand any of it. And therefore nothing is trite, like nothing, like everything's amazing to them. My daughter says wow so much in the weirdest possible ways. But it helps enormously. I mean, I'd say most of my stories now they're ideas that she gave me in one way or another, so. Yeah.
Do you ever self-publish your books?
No, I'm not self-published. Self-publishing is great. And it's amazing what people can do now, the quality of work they can self-publish. But I've worked as a writer since I was in school, and I didn't want to, I don't sell that many books, but I didn't want to pay, it felt like a step backwards just to go back and start paying for it, so I wanted at least someone to lose money on me, rather than me to lose money on me. So Henschel House is my publisher. They're just a small publisher based in Milwaukee, but they were very nice with the first book, and this next one will be, I'm really excited. There's a national radio publicity tour that kicks off next week actually and goes through the holidays. So I'll be interviewed over and over and over again on public radio affiliates all over the country, and hopefully a few people here and there will buy it. So that'll be exciting.
Is your writing entirely self-generated and self-taught, or have you taken some, like even here in this town, they'll have little things on writing a novelette or writing poetry or something?
No, writing groups are garbage. Don't do that. No, I'm kidding. We're hosting one right now. That's like,
it's just there's
no,
techniques that you use.
And once again, I'm not that good, and you'll read this and you'll be like, oh, he's not that good. But I've been, every single day since I was about 15, I've been working on this. And that includes, I haven't graduated from any courses, I didn't do the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is a really famous one, but I've been, there's a really famous author named Alex Bledsoe, who writes, he's published 10 novels, and so he sold more books while I was doing this reading than I've ever sold in my life, probably. But we have breakfast every week and talk about what we're writing and how we're writing it and things like that. I have a group of many writers I do that with all the time, and just always done it. And a network of people, not just writers, but one of the best, she's not even named, but Erica Janik was a producer at Wisconsin Public Radio, and she was my producer for a bunch of pieces I did, and she edited a lot of those stories that ended up in that book. And there's so many people that worked on that book beyond me. It's about half the length it was when I first wrote it, for starters, so. But yeah, it's all the time. Every opportunity I get, I work on it. So definitely not self-taught, definitely taught by others.
I was going to ask, did your family travel with you and go to some of these readings?
A little bit, yeah. We had some fun. We only on the fun ones. Like they go, when I did one in Door County, they came with me on that one and stuff like that. We had fun. We took a little trip to Iowa last summer when I was doing something there, or I did a book festival in Illinois and they came with me. But they don't always, it depends. I think that I'm the reason Book World went out of business. They ordered a ton of my books and started carrying it, and then like a week later they returned them all and went out of business.
Simply consequence.
Correlation is not causation, I know, but it was The life of a small-time author is, you probably don't think it's that glamorous. It's less glamorous than you think it is. I spent a lot of hours just like in a corner at a book world somewhere, like just at a table with the manager of the store reminding me to harass customers or something. That book is not that good, but I will say that it's worth it just to read about Bonnie, who's on the cover, because she's a magnificent person, and a reminder that you can live a life where you're marginalized and physically hurt and emotionally hurt and still have a beautiful story to tell when it's all over. In fact, I'm just gonna read you one sentence, don't worry, you all looked terrified for a second.
And perhaps the page generates the beauty.
Oh, yes. No, so, I'm not giving away too much, but Bonnie, who's 84 now actually, so she gave me, when my daughter was born, I ran into her and she gives out these glossy glamour shots of herself when she was like 25 or whatever. She carries them around, they're always in her car. And she gave me one and was like, give this to your daughter. And I was like, that's a really freaking weird thing to give my like 2-day-old daughter. And I brought it home and I was like, this is fantastic. And I did give it to her, and it's in a little box of her childhood stuff, with like her little booties and her little, handprints from the hospital and everything. And the reason is to serve as a reminder, because someday my daughter will ask me if beauty is real, and I'll reply yes. And she'll ask if it's fleeting, and again I'll say yes. And I know what comes next, because the question is one we all ask when we are young. If everything is going to end someday, does any of it really matter? She'll look up at her dad, an agreeable man with limited verbal skills, and ask this question. I'll speak in a hushed tone, beckon her closer, and reply, yes.